or good afternoon. And for those of you across the pond, including our speaker today, good night, for crying out loud. Robin is over in Australia, so it's 1 o'clock in the morning over there. But she is wide awake. We've been having a great conversation, and she's ready to talk to you a little bit about how to acquire new donors and how you're going to create that engaging donor journey, especially in these wonderful times of 2020. We will be recording this broadcast today, so if it becomes a fire hose of love and there's a lot of information here, you'll be able to rewatch that, because we will be recording this webinar today. By the way, I'm Randy Hawthorne, and I am the executive editor of Nonprofit Hub, in case you were wondering. Robin and I have been having a great conversation, and she has been stranded, for lack of a better term, in Australia because of the coronavirus. So thank you, Robin, for being here. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you for having me. Keeping me awake here.
Yeah, well, I was like, wait a minute, did she doze off? No, of course she did not. She said she's been doing this weird schedule ever since she got there and has been working from Australia. So thank you for joining us today. It really means a lot to me that you're here. I am really excited to hear about your content. So I'm just going to step out of the way and let you do your thing.
Cool. Well, thank you, Randy. Well, actually, I just want to preface this and say this is content direct from studying in Australia, some of the not-for-profits here. So look at that. The benefit of being in Australia is you get this great webinar from me. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So this webinar is how to acquire new donors and create an engaging donor journey in 2020. Who knew that this would become so important? So I'm owner of Development Consulting Solutions. I have a certified fundraising executive, a master's in philanthropy and fund development. And you're probably going, an MFIA. What is she, an artist or something? No, that's a member of the Fundraising Institute of Australia, which I am the leader of their mentorship program. And I actually today coached dozens of nonprofit organizations to start their first fundraising efforts. And I really am on this mission to transform philanthropy through training and coaching. So here we have as Randy was saying, we have a ton of content to go through today. So I'm going to try to get through this rather quickly. But as he noted, it is being recorded, so you will get this information later. So here's what we're going to learn today. We're going to cover how to take a multi-channeled approach to donor communications. We're going to take a look at that. What does that mean? And then we're going to step you through using what I refer to as lead magnets and customer sales maps to acquire new donors, some for-profit concepts. And then we're going to align those digital strategies to create what they call here in Australia is a cohesive donor journey. How many of us have heard the term donor journey? And then looking at what do the timely touch points in a donor journey consist of. And then most importantly, if we don't track and measure, we can't optimize our digital methods, our acquisition methods, as well as our donor journey. I had sent over to the folks Nonprofit Hub some great resources, so they'll get those out to you later on. But why don't we just get started, and feel free to type into the questions box any questions you may have, or the chat box as well, and I'm sure Randy and I will go over them at the end of the webinar. So what is a multi-channeled approach? Well, basically, right, we all know it's that integrated approach that targets both offline and online communication via both direct and indirect channels. So what are some of those channels? Well, for those of us in the UK and Australia, face-to-face fundraising, which is kind of like canvassing, from anything from canvassing to in-person solicitation is really face-to-face. And then we have things like, like multi-channeled is about like online, offline, so direct mail, email, or as folks here call it, electronic direct mail, EDMs. That was a big word for me. And then we have things like, of course, social media, targeted social media, like buying advertising and those kinds of things. Your website is definitely that. Peer-to-peer fundraising, crowd fundraising, partnerships, corporate partnerships. I'm talking more than like sponsorships, but partnerships. And then traditional marketing. Some of us still do that. That's still big here in Australia, where they actually they do gifts and wills or bequest plan giving through television and radio, right? Get that. And then we're using things today like SMS, which is who knew, short message servicing, text messaging, and then video messages are becoming highly popular. And then now MMS, which is multimedia messaging services, which is like when you can add like, photos and videos to your text messaging. Wow, right? So why a multi-channeled approach? Well, what we know is today we are in control of the channels that we choose, and there are so many channels. When I grew up, there was 3 channels on TV, right? 10, 6, 10, and 12. Um, but there is more information on multiple devices, iPads, iPhones, what have you. And what we do know is that donors are obviously online looking for the charities or causes that align with their own passions and beliefs. So why a multi-channeled approach? Well, what we know is that multi-channel communications boosts donor revenue. Bottom line, I've seen it myself. I've seen it happen, right? So, and it opens up new sources and streams of revenue. Your calendar year-end campaigns that are coming up should be multi-channeled. You should have video messaging, video appeals. You should have direct mail appeals. You should be using text messaging, multimedia messaging, all of those things to boost your revenue and create what I'm going to talk about later called the halo effect. What we do know is that this multi-channel approach, and we're going to take a look at this in a little bit, develops deeper relationships with both your existing and new donors through donor journeys. And we know that collaboration, we eliminate those silos that exist within our organizations, because we need to have a non-siloed approach with marketing and communications and those folks. So here's a great study from Next After, and I go to show this, but look, right, look at the graph. It is quite evident that a multi-channeled approach boosts annual value of a donor, right? So you up to 211%. So you see offline only, like direct mail, is like 159. And then when you include all channels, look at how that shoots up to 211%. Now, taking a look at retention rates in the following year using a multi-channel donor approach, and this again is from Next After, but you will see offline, just one channel, direct mail, is fairly low. And then look at how high it jumps up to 67% for a multi-channeled approach. So we all know that we have a big issue with donor retention in this country. So why not use that multi-channeled approach? Well, let's move into talking about like um, uh, how do we align digital strategies, right? So what is, well, I'm in Australia. It's now 1:10 in the morning, right? Like I can't believe this. But what is it that they call a donor journey here? How many of you have heard something called a donor journey? I just actually took a whole training, a full day training, 9 to 5, on how to create and map out a donor journey. And someday that'll be a webinar that I actually do step by step. Isn't that cool? So what is a donor journey? It is this unique fundraising experience tailored to each donor. Hint, hint, it sounds like what we do offline, right, with major donors and individual donors converted to digital techniques. So for us, for me, it's much more than that single one-off transaction. It's putting people into a stream and sharing with them a story. So it takes them from building awareness about our cause and who we are bringing them into our fold, and then really helping to show them who we are, and then building up to that ask, right? So it's positive and consistent encounters. Like here is a screenshot of a sample donor journey that is out there, and you'll see that it's actually, we map out each segment of the journey with our donors from the moment, as you see on the bottom left, that they become aware of us, to the sequencing of communications where they grow in greater awareness and interest to the point that they actually make their first gift and beyond. But in order to start it, to go back here, in order to start your donor journey, you have to have kind of an idea of who your donor personas are, right? In order to attract them. What we do know is, all right, we're not all alike. Randy and I were talking about that before we started this webinar. Like, we're humans, right? Like, we are not all alike, right? So we all have individual motivations as to why we give, what would motivate us, what concerns us, what causes are important, right? And so we have to understand kind of our donors' charitable behaviors, our current donors. So looking at them, we need to determine how often do they donate? Who's our ideal donor? Like, we've all heard about donor personas, right? So how much do they donate? When are they most likely to donate? And then we want to capture that information and create an ideal persona so that, number one, we can attract our ideal donors digitally, and number two, map out a process that we know that would attract them each step of the way from beginning to end, from like building awareness to moving them through our donor journey to the point that they actually make a gift. So you actually want to study your current donor's behavior to get an idea of who they are before you map out their journey. And as you go through this, you'll see where your existing journey, if you look at what you're doing currently, has gaps, right? So you want to focus on, how your donor experience is instead of income, like looking at transformation rather than transactional. And we don't want to focus on short-term giving. Now, this is where I get really excited. I've been in fundraising 26 years this year. Like, I think I'm giving away my age because that was like right after I graduated with my undergraduate, which was right after I went to high school to get into that stream. So that goes, you can figure out my age from there. But, from that moment, people always said, well, fundraising isn't sales. And I've always kind of like scratched my head and gone, well, I don't know. I think it kind of is. I was married to a life insurance salesman. I'm like, yeah, okay. I think that's what made me a great fundraiser, is some of those same concepts. Well, here in Australia, when I became to be when I got more interested in digital fundraising, because they do a lot of that, not so much major giving, individual giving, although some organizations who are big do it well, like Greenpeace and so forth, Mission Australia, those folks. But what I noticed is they were talking about things like sales funnels and customer journeys. So then I went online and I started to research, well, what is a sales funnel? Well, right, a sales funnel really is a map. Like if you Google, don't Google right now, but if you Google sales funnel, you'll see this visual representation of a funnel of a consumer journey from the point that they initially get contact with us until they move into our funnel and get to the bottom. Notice how there's like change coming out of that graphic there and someone's picking up, right? Isn't that like, we're like, yeah, right? Like that's what we're hoping, that we create donors through this process. So like all funnels, right? Think of our funnels at home. It's widest at the top and narrowest at the bottom. This really is a for-profit industry concept. Shame on me for all those people who say fundraising is not for profit, right? Well, kind of it is, isn't it, right? Some senses. But what we realize is that, like a funnel and sand going through a funnel or liquid going through a funnel, we're like constantly moving through until that next phase. And it's funny because Randy and I were talking about this before the webinar, and I was saying to him how like people who are in my sales funnel, like in my own business, like I'm a consultant, right? And I have one of these set up and people drop out and they like unsubscribe. I'm like, that's cool because guess what? They're like doing qualification, right? They're saying, oops, I'm not interested in what you have to offer, so I'm going to unsubscribe. And I'm like, for every unsubscribe I get, I'm like, yay, a bell has rung and someone has said, I'm just not interested in your content. I'm qualifying myself, right? Like a donor, you qualify a donor when you're doing that offline. Same thing here. So yes, people are going to drop out of your funnel. Not everyone is going to stay. So here's like a in-depth view of that sales funnel. So of course, like in regular fundraising, when we have all those potential suspects out there that we want to turn into prospects through qualification, those are the folks, and I should have put this up there, that are kind of like swimming outside of your digital funnel, right? Like they haven't made it in. Those are the suspects. And then once they make it into the funnel, they become your prospects, right? And so they become aware of who your organization is. And then you create this donor journey, right? This prospective donor journey. What would we call that offline? Hint, hint. Well, first we'd have like qualification and then cultivation, and then eventually they move through our digital funnel and we get to the point of making, i.e., a sale or an ask, right? Or they make a gift. So what are that? So what, looking back at that, we see awareness and discovery. This is where a potential suspect realizes that there is a cause that they may be interested in. And I'm going to talk about how you give them something to bring them into your funnel. Hint, hint, lead magnet. And we're going to dive into that in depth. So lead magnets can be things like blogs, high-level bulleted information. Probably like Randy is using this as a lead magnet too, right? This webinar we're on could be, right, Randy? There's a better chance of increasing your donor base if people know who you are. So your top rationale for that top level of your customer journey, that awareness discovery, is to turn suspects or untapped people into prospects. Then you bring them in, and this is where you may have like what is called an automated email stream, right? Like how many of us wish we had a CRM system that did automated emails? But this is where you'd actually put them on a donor journey where they start to learn more about who you are. So you may send them emails and things like, get connected with us. Here's who we are. Here's some success stories. Here's our annual report. So folks are beginning to learn more about you through, hint, hint, the cultivation process, but just digitally. And they're starting to form opinions about you and whether or not they should actually, like, is this a cause that I want to make a gift to, right? And so you want to think carefully about what tools you're using at this point to communicate your message. So at this point, your outcome in the middle of your customer or your donor sales funnel, customer journey, is that you take those prospects who entered into your funnel and you turn them into almost potential donors. Now, I kind of get frustrated with people who say, well, no, they're not converting on my website. They're not making a donation. Well, duh, just like we don't expect a donor to make a donation in real life on the first date, we can't expect the same thing digitally as well. So the bottom part of our funnel is when a donor decides. We put the ask out there, the order's there, and now they're like, okay, so what do I do, right? So this is where you put the ask and you make your donate button visible, you send them an ask email, right? You direct them to your website where they can make a gift. And this is the time where we are trying to convert them from prospect potential donor to a donor. It's the end stage of your digital journey where you make that ask. So I know you're probably saying, boy, this sounds familiar. I've been through a funnel, I think myself, right? Like we think I've been through a funnel. Yes, you have. And I'm going to share with you how to actually use lead conversions for donor acquisition. So this is what they call here, when I say here, I mean Australia, lead generation. So they're actually digital fundraising folks who are specialists in lead generation. And you use what is called a lead magnet. Can you tell how passionate I am about this? Because I actually have coached organizations after doing a similar webinar to this, and they have actually gone on to implement lead magnets and started to convert just even some of their website visitors. I'm not talking about, yes, we'll talk about Facebook ads and those kinds of things, but I bet you have enough organic visitors on your website that you are not converting. How many of you like, yeah, amen, amen, amen. I see my Google Analytics and I'm realizing like 1%, if that, are even converting a year, like not even a month, right? So what is a lead magnet? It is something of value that someone will exchange an email for. Gone are the days of like your newsletter sign up, boring, right? Like how many of you still have that as your lead magnet? No, today folks are using things like surveys, right? Petitions, courses, quizzes, polls, downloadable PDFs, things of value that engages them. And, lead magnets are important because, well, number one, it's part of a healthy donor retention initiative, right? It makes the crux of a low-cost donor acquisition method because all you have to do is take content that you've already developed and kind of repurpose it into this thing, right? And I have actually seen this done really, really well where, like things like, so here's the thing, like, let me go back to this slide here. Whoops. So surveys, petitions, and guides. I'm going to stop here and say the interesting thing about this is that this is where you begin to take a prospect and do what we call offline qualification, right? So if you set up a survey and someone takes the survey, you can then identify people based upon their behavior. For instance, I'm going to do something very simple here. If you're an animal organization, you can say, right, okay, I'm a cat lover or a dog lover by the way that I answer that survey. And then if you have a good enough CRM system, even MailChimp will do this, folks. MailChimp will do this, even the free version, right? MailChimp will do this. And that's why I love MailChimp, because MailChimp will allow you to do landing pages and those kinds of things, right? But anyways, so you can add a tag to the person after they take their survey to say, this is a cat person, this is a dog person. Once they are tagged, you can put them into, guess what? Identity-based digital streams based upon their tag. So cat people can go down one digital stream, they can be separated out and put into an automated email sequence for cat people. Dog people can have a tag and they're put into a completely different automated email stream that recognizes them as dog people. Brilliant. So now you're looking at identities, right? And so now you're talking to people's identities, right? So now you're becoming highly personalized in how you communicate with your donors. Isn't this like, wow, right? Like surveys. So a survey isn't just a tool to get people into your funnel. It's a great tool to begin to identify your donors and how they're engaging in who you are, right? Like, wow. So because you do that, number one, you're going to attract and acquire donors more easily. Because you know their identity and you've tagged them, you're going to retain them because the communications that you're going to provide to them are not going to be these blanket communications. They're going to be communications that are tailored specifically to your donor and their identity, right? And think about the days when we once had to, right? We had to buy lists. Like I come from that day when we had to purchase expensive lists to do direct mail acquisition, and we had to put the mailing together, print it up, postage, right? Maybe we had a premium, a front end premium, which costed us, or maybe we had a back end premium. But all of those things were labor intensive and highly costly, right? And so donor acquisition was always something that probably our groups never wanted to invest in, or our boards never saw the rationale for investing in something that would actually lose us money to start off with. Board members couldn't see the fact that there was a longer term value to our direct mail donor acquisition program. So this is very low cost. What do you have to do? You may need to get MailChimp or some other software or CRM system, and you may need to repurpose content that you already have hanging around that someone can do internally through, creating a PDF, and you may need to set up a landing page. Okay. Um, and that's about it. I bet you have enough organic co- organic traffic on your website that you don't even need to invest in digital ads. Digital ads are great, but you don't need to do that to start off with, right? So once we have them in our funnel, you're like, okay, Robin, so what's this thing called donor journey? And so what am I supposed to say, and how am I supposed to touch my donors, right? So taking a prospect through the cultivation process online. So what is a touch point, right? So a touch point is any marketing point of contact or interaction between you and that prospective donor. So a touch point could be, you may want to share with them content from your blog, or my thing is a welcome series. Years ago, in order for direct mail acquisition to work well, we needed a welcome series follow-up mail piece. So again, that added to the cost of direct mail donor acquisition. Here, same thing, but you're going to do the welcome series, right? You're going to bring them through that indoctrination online. I could go into donor journey mapping. Like I said, that was a whole day class that I just took a week ago. Actually today, a week ago. And I mean, you could literally sit and look at, from a moment a donor enters in, how to map out each sequence, why, how, what the timing is. That could be just another workshop, and probably will be someday, that I put together, right? The most important thing is that you start to think strategically about building out some kind of funnel where you step people through information about your organization to create a journey. Now, this could also be online and offline channels, but the point is that you want to put people on a path where they start to grow in increasing awareness of who you are as an organization, so that you can eventually get to the point of making that ask. And hopefully, like I said, through the lead conversion or the lead magnet, you can have a lead magnet that will allow you to actually identify their preferences and put folks on a highly personalized journey, which means that you may actually have multiple donor journeys that are happening. So you may have a dog, a cat, a fish, a bird donor journey for an animal organization. Get it? It's like, wow, this was mind-blowing for me. Maybe not for you, but for me, it was like, wow. So studying this here, it was like, organizations of all sizes are acquiring donors here in Australia through these means. Now, I met with someone who didn't have a donor base to start with in a very small women's advocacy organization, and she talked about a very basic funnel and lead conversion magnet that she was starting up. Two places where I have seen organizations like, let's take the Sydney Children's Hospital, who in one campaign acquired 3,000 new donors. 3,000 new donors through this process. I myself in my own business are using now these same concepts, and I am acquiring, let's see here, from the start of August 8/4, I had 6,686 people on my mailing list. I am now almost up to 6,800 people on my mailing list through using lead conversions and putting folks into customer journeys. It is real, it's happening, but you have to keep it simple, right? So develop a basic map for your funnel. At this point, don't get caught up in overthinking the design. Start with some kind of plan. You want to capture every interaction that that person has, and you're gonna kind of identify what you're already doing. Now, there's something called the halo effect, and there's two definitions for the halo effect that I'm going to go over. One definition of the halo effect is that all of these touchly time points are creating a positive, feel-good vibe about your organization to this prospective donor. For me, what I like about the halo effect is that by using a multi-channel approach, so when we create this donor journey, it's, multiple emails. You could actually, at some point in that donor journey, decide to go offline and maybe call a donor, right? Or call a prospect, introduce yourself. Sometimes I will actually even do that and say, hey, can we have a quick chat? I want to learn more about you. That could be a touch point within your system, as well as things like text messaging and so forth. But all of these touch points create a lift. A lift so that someone learns about you in multiple ways at multiple times, and the fact that content is delivered to donors at the right time in the right way. Well, you're probably like, okay, Robin, so how do I figure out in a digital way when I'm like asking at the right time, when I'm delivering the right content? And I'm going to talk about that in analyzing your metrics and optimizing your funnel in a little bit. But what you want to do is you want to leverage this halo effect and the impact of it, right? So you want to kind of build this consistent, steady campaign with strong email subject and brand messaging. Because what we do know is that it does boost their engagement with you. Now, one thing about Australians that blew me away, like you're getting trade secrets direct from Australia here, blew me away was how digitally minded they are here. Like before they start a campaign, they are determining the key metrics that they want to measure, and they're setting goals for each of those metrics, and then they're analyzing them every single day. Yes, every single day they're looking at their metrics and then optimizing. Now, is that realistic for some of us in small shops? Probably not, but it's something that we can do like during a campaign, like weekly or monthly, right? For some of us who have marketing departments and such like that, we could probably do that daily. What we do know is, folks, in every webinar that I talk about, what gets measured gets improved. So, and what gets measured gets justified. So you can go to your board and say, here are some key benchmarks, right? We set some goals and we can confirm that this is working, and here's some data to back that up. So we know that what gets measured and gets demonstrated gets invested in. So if we can prove success through metrics, we can say to our board, this is a sure bet. We need to invest more money in this and increase our efforts around this. So, success is the best testimonial for reinvestment, bringing that to your board. And what we do know is looking at things like loyalty, generosity, net income development over time, certainly things that we can measure during this process. So what are some of the tools that we can use to measure our digital journeys? Well, there are things that can allow us to map out human behavior, right? I know it's weird, it's funky. Things like pixels, things like heat maps, things like Google Analytics, all of those things. Things like the CRM system that we're using, we can look at analytics. I'm obsessed with analytics on a daily basis. We can do surveys, all of those kinds of things. But I want to bring it back to the beginning. And I say that there are 4 key metrics that demonstrate the health of your development program. And these are the ones ultimately that you should be tracking your data around, right? These are the ones that we know are a good investment of our organization's time, and they really allow us to build out that view of a donor and give us some key to some insightful interactions and behaviors. Your database is the key place to be looking at this data. Now, because we define metrics, it's like going to the doctors and having your blood pressure and your blood work done every year, right? Like you do that to start and you develop a baseline. So if we know what our donor retention rate is, particularly our donor acquisition, because that's what this webinar is about, we can say this is our baseline and we're going to measure our lead magnet, our lead conversion, our digital journey against this baseline to see how we're improving our acquisition efforts. But you need a baseline to start with. And so once you have that baseline, then you can measure your efforts and determine how you need to map out your future paths and optimize them. This is a dynamic process. Once you create your funnel or your donor journey within that funnel, it's changeable, right? You're analyzing it on a monthly, weekly, whatever basis and making mid-course corrections. So you always want to be looking at your goals and how do you measure them, how your funnel is performing, and where can you identify opportunities for improvements, and always, always, always be looking at industry standards and looking at your past, your present, and where you're going in the future. There are 4 key metrics that I like to use that we should be looking at. Number 1, growth in revenues. When you come out of this funnel, okay, you're asking people to give. Are you growing in bottom line revenue because of it, right? How are you comparing to things like Giving USA? And are you keeping trend with what the national and industry trends are saying? Now, if we went through all of this and we weren't measuring number of new donors, shame on us, because this is all about donor acquisition, right? And that's essential because I say that your donor base is naturally attritioning between 10 to 15% per year. People are dying, people are moving, you're losing contact with them. I met with someone yesterday, I'm doing a development audit for them, and I said, well, okay, they had 400 donors. I was like, oh, wow, okay, so 400 donors, beep, 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 right? Like, so you're not doing donor acquisition. So guess what? Just by you doing nothing, people are dying, people are moving. Okay, right? And we know that we have a donor retention problem to begin with, which of course right? Like is another metric to be looking at. Now, folks will say to me, I look at donor bases and I go, oh my gosh, it's so stagnant in the middle. What are you doing? Like people are not being moved up the pyramid. To me, this is one of the most often neglected measurement. But if donors are constantly upgrading their giving because we're asking them, hint, hint, and let's face it, folks, here's the other thing. Once you finish one donor journey, like once you go through that funnel and you've made the ask, and let's say they've actually given, guess what? Just like you do in offline, you put them in another digital funnel, building up to the next ask, right? So upgrading, right? So that's how you do that online. So numbers of donors retained. If you do not, I mean, we talked about in the start that by going through a multi-channeled approach, by building out these donor journeys, you are going to retain more of your donors. That's a well-known fact, right? And so if you are not doing that as a result of this, right, that's a problem. We know we have a problem as a sector. We know that we are, as a sector, lower than for-profit companies. That needs to be a critical measure or metric that you look at when you're looking at these digital donor journeys. Now, I also look at one other one, and that's the number of gifts per donor. And I say that should always be you should always be looking at increasing that. So when I talk about once they finish with one funnel, we put them into another funnel and put them on another journey, that the end result is either an upgrade and or another ask. And so these metrics really, these four metrics, number of gifts, upgrades, retention, acquisition, and of course bottom line revenue, are what I call, when I look at a development program, that shows me that a program is growing in health and effectiveness, and that it's not dying, that it is a growing program. Of course, there are other metrics that you can be looking at, but these are the top four for me. Now, how do we measure and optimize digital channels? This is a lot of information, right? Like, wow, like, are you like, woo, swimming in this? So it's good that Randy mentioned that this is going to be recorded. So there will be a recording of this to kind of go through this. And I created this PowerPoint. So this actually like an owner's manual. You can print this out and digest this material later on in an easily digestible format. So what are some analytical tools that you should be looking at once you begin to build out lead generation, donor journey streams, the funnel, all of that? Well, Google Analytics. I turn to groups who first come to me talking about this topic, and I say to them, okay, so how many folks when's the last time you pulled out your Google Analytics and looked at how many people are actually, unique visitors are actually coming to your website on a monthly basis? Oh, the light bulb goes off. I had one group recently in New York City who was a park come to me and they said, like, 2,000 a month. I went, 2,000 a month? And so how many of those are you converting? Not even 1%. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's look at that right there. You don't even have to do advertising. So, um, so looking at your analytics, how folks are coming in, what are their demographics, where are they going on your website, what are they interested in, all those kinds of things. And now there is something today called pixel tracking, right? Like how many of us know about pixel tracking? Well, you know about it because when you go to a website and you look at Nike, and then all of a sudden you go back onto Facebook, and guess what? You're like, am I being stalked? I'm seeing all the Nike ads now. Oh, that's funny. Well, that same technology is available to you. It's called retargeting. You can have a pixel and you can track where people go on your website and you can retarget to them, right? So these kinds of things you can look at. How are people staying? You can look at the traffic source, all of those kinds of things on Google Analytics. And then your CRM system. Excel, you can use Excel, not a CRM system, oh boy. But your whatever kind of system you're using, looking at the data and how it's presented. And we can see who opens our emails, we can see when they unsubscribe, we can see what they click on, how many times they open up our emails. When you're going through your donor journey, folks, this is the place that you can stop and say, let me analyze where they drop out on my funnel. Oh, wow. Wow, look at all the people dropping out on my funnel in this position at this email. Maybe this email needs to be tweaked. I do that. Oh, wow. Okay, so I've had a lot of unsubscribes on this particular email. So maybe I need to eliminate this email. Maybe I need to tweak the content of the email. Maybe you don't have good open rates for that email. Maybe you need to tweak the email subject line. All of those things. That's optimization based upon data analysis. There are things called heat maps. So you can look at how someone enters your website, where they go with their mouse, what they click on. That's a little bit more sophisticated. But also you can do things like surveys. You can collect data and ask your donors for demographic information, giving potential interests, all of those kinds of things. So once you start to look at this, you take all of your Google Analytics. To me, that's the biggest piece right there is Google Analytics, my automated dashboards, my email information. And you take that information and you optimize that journey that you're putting your prospects on. I say review data weekly. I look at it daily. I'm obsessed with it and I'm running a business, so I am looking at it daily. Look at it weekly, look at it monthly, but you need to look at it to optimize what's happening with all of your digital efforts, right? And use those learnings to revise your strategy for your target prospect audience. So you may want to optimize things like your website. You may want to adjust your banner. You may want to tweak your call to action messaging. You may want to, look at what people are looking at in terms of blogs and articles and your pop-ups and your downloads, your lead magnets and all those kinds of things. If you're currently doing ad optimization, I will say this to you. I actually have an enhanced version of this webinar that I'm working on that's step by step. So I actually take you through the steps of creating a Facebook ad to drive traffic to your funnel. I kind of show you the landing page and how to create that and what best practices around that. So I actually take you through that. But Facebook optimization, some of the folks here are actually running 20 or so ads, and they're looking at different headlines, different calls to action, different graphics, and they're testing that by doing ad campaigns. And they're going in daily and they're saying, wow, okay, this ad is trending more results, a better spend rate. So let's take money away from a poorer poorer ad result and funnel it and to redirect it to an ad that's better performing. So they're doing all of these minute adjustments on a daily basis. Now, granted, this will blow your mind away, but some organizations here, because they're not doing things offline, they're investing their offline event monies into acquisition, and they're spending some of them like $20,000 on ad spends. Okay, maybe that's not you at this point. I get that, but that's the kind of magnitude of what we're talking about for campaigns. So looking at your landing page, once we create those, how are people landing on them? I have a landing page right now that I'm looking at for my own business and going, okay, I need to tweak that. It's not converting into people joining the funnel. Why is that? And of course, your web page, you're right. There are other techniques, search engine optimization, will increase your visibility with your website so people can find you, where your lead magnet may be located, make it easier for people to become more aware of you. Woo! We finished in what? Like almost 45 minutes, maybe a little over, with all of that content. A lot. I get it, right? So here's what we went over. We looked at how do we kind of create, what is a multi-channel approach, because that's the basis of our touch lead time points. And then we looked at what is a donor journey, And how do we actually use lead magnets so that people enter into our donor journeys? And what are those touch lead time points once folks are into our donor journey? And then the importance of setting baseline metrics, looking at key metrics, and using that information to optimize what it is that you're doing throughout this whole donor journey. Wow. I'm so passionate about it. I love this stuff. I've just like opened up my eyes when I came here. The fact that I'm marooned or stranded is not a good thing, but I've used my time wisely to learn about how things are done from from a more global perspective, and really helping my small clients begin to acquire new donors digitally. So the question is, do you have any questions? And I see lots of questions in the comments box, but if you don't have any questions, like how will you what one thing will you take back to your office today and start to supercharge your online donor acquisition digital journey efforts, right? Like, whew, wow. Wow, Randy, are you there?
I am, of course, here listening very intently on what you're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, we do have a few questions and we have a few minutes left. Oh, and now they're really
Great.
starting to pop in, but we'll start
Are
with
they
this
really?
one.
Yeah.
If you are a small nonprofit with 7 full-time staff, wow, I'm a lot smaller than that. How do you approach managing multi-channel? Do you
Uh,
prioritize or just keep trying adding new channels to see what works?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always say, because I'm a fundraising coach, so I always say start where you are and add on. Like, I don't expect anyone to do all of this perfectly all at once. So even if you did one small thing to add on to your multi-channel approach, maybe it's design a lead magnet and you design a landing page and you start to collect names. Maybe you don't get to build out your journey for them quite yet, but at least you're starting to convert more than you would have if you just had a newsletter sign on. I get it. Like I'm a one person a business owner, and I do this process and it takes time. So I say start small with something and then incrementally add on. Cool. Any more? Well, I'm sure there's more questions, right?
They're coming in. I just forgot to hit
Wow.
the mute button. The most used words of 2020 are "you're still on mute." You're still on mute. Let's see here. We are just starting our digital fundraising from scratch. What are 1 or 2 tips that we should start with?
Right.
Use your
That's
words, Randy.
Yeah, so starting digital fundraising from scratch. What are the 1 or 2 most important things to, well, I think if you're just starting, the first thing is to go back to slide 1 or 2. And that was a slide about multi-channel boosting both revenue, long-term, and donor retention. So, thinking about if you're just doing direct mail now, adding on email. If you're just doing direct mail and email, adding on social. If you're just doing, direct mail, email, social, add on maybe phone, right? So becoming more comprehensive in your multi-channel approach, because we know just doing that alone will boost your retention as well as your bottom line revenue and start to create some of that halo effect to giving, that people see you in different places and decide, oh, wow, I got that direct mail piece, so now I'm seeing it on social, so let me go make my contribution now. So that's probably the top tip I would have.
Now, there's a lot of folks that are really trepidatious about creating multiple paths with a small staff.
Yes, I get it. I get it. Any specific questions there, or just kind of like,
No, it just seems
how do we
like
do this?
that's like the biggest issue, and Someone is asking if you had a visual to show how you could do multiple touch points. And one of the things that I, as a marketer and fundraiser that I've found helpful is remember that the content that you're using, you know that they're not going to see it 18 times. And if they do, great, they're going to see it on the channel that they prefer. And so just know that you can use your content over again. It's helpful to be repetitive. That's something that I kind of
absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know what systems people are using, but when you look at these multiple journeys, even something as simple as MailChimp these days, and I'm not a seller of MailChimp, right? Like, I don't have one preference over another, but people like it because it's free or low cost. Even something as simple as that has all built-in landing pages, tagging, which creates that identity base, and automated email streams. So it's the process is not tracking the multiple identities. That's not the hard part. The hard part is creating the lead magnet that will convert people. Like, for instance, here's a great example, right? Like, Randy, you have this webinar on digital fundraising, right? Every single person who attended this webinar, you could tag as someone who is interested in digital fundraising, right? Like, conceivably. And you could remarket to them content that they would be interested in. Like, Stacy Hannigan on this webinar, I'm going to put her into my digital marketing stream because I know she may be interested in digital online marketing efforts. So we'll send her white papers. We'll put her in that marketing stream. Things like, really, when you think about it and you start to think about it that way, like, as soon as someone signs up for this webinar, MailChimp can tag them with a tag that says digital, right? As soon as you upload all the registrants, I'm giving your trade secrets away here. You can tag load them as digital, and then once they're tagged as that, they get triggered into the automated email stream, because that's how you trigger the start of the automated email stream, and then it puts them into that journey. Does that make sense? So it really can be quite simple. It's the tools that you're using. But again, you have to build out the journey, and that's the hard part, right? Like creating the emails and the touch points and all of that. But it's the same thing that you do offline in the cultivation process. So let's just think about this a little bit differently, right? I hope that helps take away some of the trepidation around that. And I hope I just hope I created for you, Randy, a marketing funnel.
Well, we do try that. The thing that I struggle with is I want to get more and more personal, and that's the part that gets a little bit more
right,
troublesome, because then it just means more funnels that you're creating.
Right.
The more you can do that, the better off you are. So if you can get it down to their interests and all of those sorts of things, like you were saying, how awesome is that? So
yes, your unsubscribe rate will go really down if you start to give people content that they're actually interested in, right? Same thing with donor relations offline. Like, your whole main objective with a major gift relationship is to give people content or to build relationships with content that they want, that they're interested in, that they're motivated by. Same thing here, just on a broader, larger scale.
let's see. One last question. We're almost out of time. So how successful do you think text messaging is compared to everything else? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Because I work in donor systems, I actually hands-on. We know that, guess what? When your phone goes off, ding, what do? You pick it up and you look at it, right? Like, who's texting me, right? Like, emails, you're like, yeah, I'll answer that later. I'll look at my email box later. But like, I see a text right on my phone right now, and I'm like, who texted me? Who called me, right? Or WhatsApped me? Like, who WhatsApped me? I gotta see that. So we do know that text messaging is the most seen, I don't know if you want to call that vehicle of like, you know, email, all of that, right? So text messaging, we know people are looking at their texts. They hear the ding and they go right for that. They want to see because it's highly personal. You know, it's usually just people we know who are texting us. So we have seen tremendous responses to text messaging because it's that kind of a vehicle. The other thing that has worked really, really well these days during COVID is video appeals, video updates, and video messaging. Donors have gone bonkers over like video acknowledgments, video updates, and video messaging. We've gotten tremendous amount of feedback from my clients on using video as a medium. And even just, you know, the simple like point and shoot video from my iPhone. Hey, Mr. Smith, just wanted to thank you for this contribution, has like worked tremendously. So those are two tips. Text, yes, absolutely. And video is another one I would throw in there.
And as is often the case, I got a great tidbit out of a Q&A. So personally,
Cool.
that's awesome.
Cool,
I was
cool.
like, ooh, I am applying this to something I'm working on. Oh, okay, this
Right?
is
That's the great thing about it is like looking at the way people do different things. Like, you know, if I had come to Australia, Randy, and I kind of went, oh, Americans do it the way we should, you know, the way it should be done and da 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 da, I would have never been open to looking at any of this information and saying, how come number one, can I take this back to my business, right, and create funnels? And number two, how can I help the small not-for-profits that I work with think differently about donor acquisition and start to build broader bases within their development programs? So yeah, it's really cool stuff, but it's
well. Hey,
implementing
Robin,
it
thank
step
you
by
so much
step.
for taking time this
Yeah,
morning for you, and I guess for us still here too in Central Time Zone. But
yeah,
thank you so much for taking the time. Someone just commented, one of the best webinars I've been to in a long time. Can't wait to listen to
cool.
the recording again with others. So that's awesome. Great to
Yeah,
hear. And I do appreciate your time. And go to sleep. Go
yeah.
to sleep. Everyone else, it's your day part. Go and take this great information that you just learned and see how you can apply it. Even just a little bit of this will improve your results. So I really appreciate you all coming today and learning more to try to make this world a better place. Thanks so much, Robin, and thanks
Hey,
everyone
have a good
else.
one.
You bet.
All
Bye-bye.
right, bye.